Welcome back, everybody. Nuts and Bolts Sports, Rod, Jordan, Henry, and joining us today, another very, very special guest, Warren Shaw of NBA Baseline Podcast is joining us. Thanks for joining us, Warren. How you doing today?
My dude, I appreciate it. It's an amazing time to be here with y'all fellas. You know, round 2 from the draft shows just seems like it was around the corner, and now NBA season is about to hit us, right? So thanks so much for having me as always, man.
We spent like 10 hours together that night breaking down that draft. That was kind of insane. But yeah, thank you for joining us. The season is like, 5 days away, right? I'm getting my numbers right, 5 days away. And so we're kind of continuing our preview shows. Today we're going to talk about the Eastern Conference. We're going to break down who we think is going to end up where, why the Cavs are going to be the first seed in the Eastern Conference, all that stuff here. So just stay tuned. It's going to be a fun conversation. Tomorrow we'll be talking about the West, so tune in for that as well. But before we get into it, we weren't really planning on talking too much news here at the top. But before we went live, we got the report from Shams that Philly is reportedly now putting Ben Simmons out in the air for James Harden, possibly putting him in trade talks. I mean, we've talked this trade thing to death and the Philly situation to death on this podcast. And I know now Daryl Morey's like denying and whatnot, and who knows what's really going on there in Philly. It's like the entire thing is falling apart before the season even starts, honestly. But Shaw, I want to toss it to you first because we haven't really gotten your like in-depth thoughts on Philly. So what are your thoughts on the situation there? You know, they always have the coaching change and whatnot. And then do you have any thoughts on Simmons maybe being the target of this deal for James Harden if it does come true?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief, just, because I think a lot of people are tired of having the conversation in general. And Philadelphia, I think they need to see where this goes with Doc more than anything else. Doc and Daryl Morey are their two biggest free agents, if you will, acquisitions, in addition to obviously Danny Green and Seth Curry as well, too, from the actual playing side. And I feel like you give this one more shot in its entirety this year. Or maybe the counter to that is at least till the trade deadline. Because I think this James Harden trade is going to be there for a little while, one way or the other. And if I'm Philly, I'm just trying to ride it out with I had. Because if the asking price is Simmons and 3 firsts or whatever the hell it is that, is being reported out there, that's too high of a cost if you're the Philadelphia 76ers, for a roster that you still may need to tweak down the line anyway. So, and from the Houston side, at some point, I think Harden's going to go. I don't know if it's Philly. I don't know if it's Milwaukee, Boston, Miami, whoever. Who knows? But I see where this is going, and I think Philadelphia just needs to ride it out.
Yeah. What about you, Henry? What are your thoughts on that? I know we the three of us have sort of talked about it to death, but I don't know if this wrench sort of thrown into everything changes your thoughts on it at all.
I'm just going to reiterate the theme of the show towards James Harden. Like he's become a problem for the Houston Rockets. And I feel bad for them, especially having a brand new head coach, John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins. They can make a lot of noise with James Harden fully functional and fully, committed to the team, but that's not the case. So shipping him off to Philly in itself, they have their own problems. And I do believe that if James Harden were to land there, it's not going to fix any of those problems. If anything, it might make it worse because there's just too many chemistry issues with that guy. He demands too much, and the franchise can give him whatever he wants, but that's never going to be enough. So to keep it brief, whatever happens, hopefully in between that trade transition, hopefully he loses some weight too. I know that was circulating through Twitter and everything. I don't know what happened there, but I'm going to toss it to Jordan. I want to hear what Jordan has to say.
I mean, my thoughts on James Harden are well documented. It's kind of the same thing at this point. I mean, at least he's shown up. I know that was the big fiasco the other day was the weight issue, but I know how cameras can be pretty deceiving. I think he's not quite as big as we were hoping that he would be in order to make the jokes they're making. But, it's tough to tell what's going on. Obviously, Houston's doing the smart thing, and they're asking around to at least see what they can, get possibly from teams. I know Morey did just, deny the whole we're not trading Ben Simmons thing. I take that with some grain of salt because I have seen other teams in the past say similar things, and then they have shipped guys out. Case in point, Blake Griffin, they signed him to that big extension, that max deal, and they were talking about we're going to hang his jersey in the rafter. He's going to be a Clipper for life. And 4 months later, they traded him to Detroit. So I take everything that GMs and owners say with a little bit of grain of salt. I think we're going to see how it plays out for the next couple of weeks. I expect Harden to at least be there through the first probably 3 to 4 weeks of the season. After that, it's probably going to be up in the air.
The whole Harden fiasco is just, it's worn out at this point. And if Philly wants to, I thought the whole experiment was to bring Doc in and see if that does get Philadelphia over the hump. And, honestly, sending Harden there does not make them a better team than having Simmons on that roster. And yeah, like you guys have said, it's well documented that we think that Simmons is the much better player of the two in terms of him and Embiid. And Embiid would, I think, be the better trade asset. Seems like, we don't know. We really don't know. It is a weird situation. I hope they don't go and make that deal and trade Simmons for Harden. If that does end up coming to fruition, I think that'll be kind of a disaster. But yeah, we'll keep you guys posted on that because that whole thing has been a roller coaster in itself. The momentum has been up and down and up and down, and we really don't know if Harden is going to get dealt or not, and what his status in Houston is. So we'll keep you guys posted on that. But yeah, let's go ahead and talk about the East now because a lot of changes in the conference. Brooklyn obviously being I think the big sort of shining thing that a lot of people are looking at. Are they going to succeed to the level that a lot of people are expecting them to? Boston has a little bit of a different look. Obviously, Philly has a different look. Milwaukee gained some key assets as well. A lot of changes here in the Eastern Conference. And when I was sort of breaking these rankings down and kind of predicting who I thought was going to end up where, a lot of it, the East felt deeper this year than it has in previous years. And I'm not talking as deep as the West, where you're 13 of the 15 teams can make the playoffs. But I feel like in previous years, it's been a top 5 race and then everybody else is kind of fallen by the wayside. I feel like in the Eastern Conference, there are about 9 teams this season that could be fighting for playoff spots. I think some of the teams, there's still a little bit that we have to see from them. Young players, a lot of defensive issues and whatnot. And some of these teams, I'm sure you can kind of pinpoint who I'm talking about there. But, this Eastern Conference feels like a better conference than it has in previous years. So the way we're going to go about this is we're going to kind of just lay out our sort of, our playoff seedings, our top 8 here at the top, and then we'll break it down team by team and discuss it from there. But Shaw, I'm going to toss it back to you now. Why don't you give us your 1 through 8, however you see most appropriate in terms of who you see possibly making a run of the playoffs here in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, Raj, I think your point is extremely valid in terms of looking at the Eastern Conference. It is a better product overall that should be out there on the courts this year. And it's hard to predict because I really feel like teams 1 through 5, 1 through 6 could really fall anywhere. I think it's going to be pretty tight. You'd still feel, for me, Milwaukee should have some of the most continuity coming into this situation. So I'm just going to lay it out quick. I think Milwaukee ends up as your top seed. I'm going to give Brooklyn the nod. I think the talent level of Kyrie and KD are just too much, to not end up as a number 2 seed. I think Miami will end up 3. And then here's where I get confused because now you're just throwing ish at a wall right now. I'll say Boston 4, Philly 5, and Toronto 6. And then from here, then it becomes a little bit harder when it comes to those final teams making it into the playoffs. But I definitely have the Atlanta Hawks in there. I think they sneak in, and the Pacers. So I think somewhere between 7 and 8 is how those 2 teams fill it in. So for the sake of argument, I'll put Indiana 7 and Atlanta 8 simply because they're coming from the lottery from last year. And then I think I have Washington and Charlotte as the play-in teams actually trying to take the spots away from Atlanta.
We were almost spot on exactly to the point when you were in the top 6. We have the exact same. So I have Milwaukee, Brooklyn, Miami, Boston, Philly, Toronto, Indy, and Washington. I was kind of going back and forth for that 7 and 8 spot. I actually ended up putting Washington at 8 just because Washington was obviously, the only team in the Eastern Conference that had a shot at making the playoffs that wasn't in that top 8 last year. And I thought the addition of Russell Westbrook, well, I don't think it's necessarily an improvement from John Wall. He's more likely than John Wall going to play games. John Wall, we don't know even if he's going to play games down there in Houston, how long he's going to last for the season. You expect Russell Westbrook to play games, and most Westbrook teams make the playoffs. Even those OKC teams before he left, they were not great teams, but they were still making a run at the 6th seed, and that's in the Western Conference. So I think him coming over to the Eastern Conference, pairing with Beal, it's a little bit of a fresh start for Washington, and that's honestly sometimes that's all you can really ask for, especially when you're right on the outside looking in. So I ended up putting Washington at my 7, and then I gave Indy the 8 spot simply because I think Depot's not going to make it out of the season in Indy, and I think they're going to probably be fighting for that 5 or 6 at the start, and then maybe they'll get dealt the deadline, and then they'll drop a couple of spots, but not enough to. I think Atlanta, that was a team that I was hinting at. That's my number 9. I think the talent is there. I think in a year or 2 they'll probably be right there, maybe even that top 5 in the Eastern Conference, but I don't think they're going to be there quite yet. They've still got to figure out some chemistry issues. They've got to figure out the defensive thing. That's huge for that team. And then I have Orlando there because I think Orlando's just kind of the forgotten team that they're always in the hunt. They're always in the hunt. They keep making that 8 seed, and I don't think they're going to make the playoffs this year. But I think as long as they keep their pieces intact, if Aaron Gordon has a good season, I think they could definitely make a run at least at that play-in tournament. So that's kind of how my shook out. Pretty similar to yours, Jordan. I'm going to toss it to you now. What's your 1 through 8?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty similar to you guys, and I agree with what you said at the beginning too about how the definitely the top like 5 or 6 teams in the East they're much more competitive. They're going to be very, very good. I think we saw last year too, even record and win percentage wise, that top 4 in the East was very on par with what we had in the West. It's just kind of the overall depth of teams in the West that kind of gives them that separation. But I agree with Shaw and you guys. I have Milwaukee 1. I think Giannis still in his prime, just signed that max extension. The addition of Drew Holiday is going to be, very helpful as well. I think they're just going to, he's kind of like he's got these like that old LeBron feel from those early Cavs years where you can just almost pencil them in for a top 1 or 2 seed every year. Number 2, I went with Miami. I think that, the loss of Jay Crowder hurts, but guys like Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, Bam, they're only going to get better. And, they have a bitter taste in their mouth after losing the final. So I think they're going to come out guns blazing. I have Brooklyn just behind them. Probably would have put them as the 2 seed, but I just want to make sure that Kyrie and KD can be fully healthy. We know the injury history between the 2 of them. It's well documented. So that could easily switch if they are able to play almost all of the games this year. I have Boston at 4, Philly at 5, Toronto at 6, Indy at 7. I agree with you. The Oladipo thing's pretty up in the air. We'll see exactly if he makes it through the whole year there or if he's gone by that new trade deadline. And then I do have the Hawks, making it in there at 8. I think they were kind of like the weird trendy pick last year, but then the season started and we realized they had a lot of holes. And they did a good job, I think, of plugging some of those up. Defensively, they're still going to have a lot of issues, but just having a bevy of scorers, like Bogdanovich, Gallinari, Herter, and those guys are only going to get better around Trae Young. I think that's going to help him grow as well. And then kind of for that play-in, I think Washington's going to be there. I think you're right. While Westbrook isn't probably too much more talented than John Wall, I think just being in a new spot, he's playing with his old coach and Scott Brooks, who he loves, and I think him and Bradley Beal are going to have really good chemistry. And then you could see Charlotte in there. Maybe if the Bulls put some things together, that whoever that second play-in game, they may, it could be a lot of different teams, but I think that's where I have it at right now.
Okay. And Henry, what about you?
I got my list right here. So 1 through 8. I got the Nets at number 1 because Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, I think the little exhibition that they're able to show us in the preseason so far is obviously just a sample size of what they have to offer coming back to the season. Because honestly, when Kyrie Irving is healthy, he's a top 3 point guard in the league, hands down. He's a mess off the court, and with a lot of things that he says that are very controversial. But as a hooper, he's one of the best. And now he has Kevin Durant alongside him, who, even though coming off his torn Achilles, I do believe that he's gonna, if he plays like a 90 to a 95% Kevin Durant, I think that's more than enough to have the Nets as a number 1 seed. Number 2, I have the Miami Heat because of that championship, of that finals pedigree that they have now. It's just all that experience and confidence for people like Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, that needed it the most, in order to break a certain barrier. I know they're very young in their career, but they really just catapulted themselves to new heights with all that experience. I don't know if you guys noticed, but I noticed the difference in play from teams that went deep in the bubble to teams that weren't in the bubble at all. And you know what? That just comes to rust too, like, because the Hawks haven't played since last March. A lot of teams have not played since last March. So I feel like teams that overcame adversity, especially in the bubble, are the ones that are going to be well equipped in order to make a deep playoff run. Number 3, I have the Bucks. Number 3, because I know they're number 1 seed worthy, especially because of Giannis, but they were just a disappointment, at least to me, last season. I thought they could do a lot more, especially with the team that they have. But now having Drew Holiday along them, I think it's only going to strengthen them. But they are going against a much improved Nets team and a much improved Miami Heat team. Number 4, hurts me to say, but I have the Boston Celtics. Obviously, I will want them number 1, but that's not the case. But number 4, for many reasons, just the point guard issues, the Kemba Walker injuries, Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown. I still believe that they're in that threshold that they still need to break that little barrier that's stopping them from being, full-fledged all-stars or superstars themselves. And I feel like, there needs to be more communication also, with their big men, because Robin Williams, Grant Williams, they're solid pieces, but they're not very consistent. And Taco Fall is in and out of the rotation, so they just need to figure things out. So far, if they're going to keep that pattern going, I can see them as the fourth seed. For fifth, I can see the Raptors, even though they lost Serge Ibaka and Marc Gasol. I do believe they're still very equipped to be a top five team in the East. And I know Raj was talking about how the East is a lot deeper too. And I do believe the East, especially compared to the last 5 years, is a lot deeper. And the Raptors, even though they don't have a Kawhi Leonard anymore on their team, they have that backcourt of Fred VanVleet and Kyle Lowry. And I do believe that Fred VanVleet is only going to get better. He has a lot of confidence in himself too. And I see just growing and growing. So I can see the Raptors making some noise, but as a fifth seed. Now for 6 through 8, for 6, I have Philly. Philly is just like I was talking about. They're just kind of a mess on their own. They're just trying to figure out a lot of things. 7, I have the Hawks though, not at the 8th seed. So 7, because I can see Trae Young making the jump. All the new acquisitions with Bogdan Bogdanovic, Danilo Gallinari. I feel like they made the right offseason moves, and they were the second best team, having the second best team with the second best offseason, aside from the Lakers. And like I said, kudos to Jordan and his team because they had the best offseason, but right behind them is going to be the Hawks, I believe. And number 8, the Pacers. I feel like, they can be interchangeable with the Magic, but at number 8, I have the Pacers. Not too much going on there. TJ Warren, I know he had those 50-point games in the bubble, but is he going to have those type of performances in the regular season or in the playoffs? Kind of doubted, but honestly, we're going to have to see from there. But yeah, that's my 1 through 8.
All right, cool. I kind of want to start with Milwaukee because Henry, you were the only one that really didn't have them in that top tier. Not that where you had them was a bad spot, but I am interested because this is obviously also coming off the heels of Giannis signing the Supermax. The thing is with Milwaukee, and this is something that I know, Jordan, you've stressed time and time again, is that they're similar to those Budenholzer-led Hawk teams where they're going to win regular season games. And I see that continuing into this season. I don't see them dropping off because, Giannis is hungry. And we talk about voter fatigue and whatnot with MVP. That I don't think that's going to affect his play at all. I don't think he has a third MVP in his mind. Like, he just wants to go out there and win. And Drew Holiday is a major improvement at the point guard position. I know he is starting to sort of hit that twilight of his career, getting into the upper echelon, but we saw what he did last year in New Orleans, and we know he could still really play on both ends of the floor. I feel like that's such a massive upgrade from Eric Bledsoe that team really can't go down. But I'll open it up to the field. Where do you guys sort of sit on Milwaukee and Giannis's extension and whatnot? Anybody, feel free to respond.
I think good for Milwaukee, good for small market teams. It's definitely a win for them. The fact that they were able to convince Giannis to stay there, especially after the failed Bogdanovic trade, I think that had caused a little bit of a rift, but apparently they had some meeting where the GM and the owners went in and whatever they said must have worked. So it's definitely a win for them. They now have 4 or 5 extra years to try and build a championship roster. As far as this year, like I said, I agree with you. I think they're going to be much like those other Hawks teams that Budenholzer's coach. I think they're going to be like those, that 08 to 2010 LeBron Cavs team where they're winning, 75% of their games, almost cruising in the regular season. Because of that, Giannis is that good. He's that talented. The addition of Drew Holiday helps. They still have some of their other pieces. Middleton, I think, would be, him and Holiday be able to kind of flip between the second and third option each night, depending on what the matchups that they have kind of dictate. The only issue for them, I think, is their bench is a little bit weaker now. They lost some guys. Obviously in the Drew Holiday trade, they lost a lot of picks moving forward, but that's kind of down the line. And then the guys that they brought in, DJ Augustine, Bobby Portis, a lot of question marks there as to who can kind of come in and fill in the gaps, because we know Budenholzer likes to play his starters only 31, 33 minutes. So it's going to be up to those guys to kind of hold down the fort when Giannis and everybody's out of the game. But I think at the end of the day, the Giannis is, you look at all of the stats, you look at the counting stats, the advanced stats, the plus minus, Giannis is always near the top of the league in that. So he has such a dramatic positive impact for his team. And I think that, while they may or may not make it to the finals this year, that could be another thing hanging over their head. I think during the regular season, I'm pretty confident they're going to be, if not a 1 seed, a very close 2 seed.
Yeah, you throw out that 75% of games probably winning. Shaw, I'm curious, when you put Milwaukee at the 1, did you have a number in mind in terms of games they would win, whether it be even more than last season, or would they fall a little bit short of what they did last year?
Yeah, I think they'd fall short. And I think everyone is, because you can't predict what's going to happen with COVID, injuries, just in general. Like, we have no idea what's happening with any of that. I'm just hopeful that there is some level of continuity for them. Listen, I don't love Bobby Portis per se, but he's a guy who's focused on scoring and rebounding. And I think that part of it is going to be consistent for them coming off the bench. And I don't know if they had that last year, especially with size. He's going to score and rebound. He may not be super efficient, but he's going to get his counting stats. And that should help them, I think, in a lot of ways too. And I love Augustine as a backup point guard. He's not quite George Hill, you know what I mean? But he's very, very serviceable in those aspects. So I think Milwaukee still is very close to what they should be in terms of regular season. As we all know here, we're all educated and know the NBA. It's not about what they do in the regular season at all. It's what they do. Do they adjust in the playoffs, and do they have success there? But the Drew Holiday situation and all of that, it makes sense for them to have some semblance of regular season success. I was interested in Henry, though. You know, he put him down as kind of 3. Yeah. So and that's all very possible too. But there's everything said. It all depends on COVID and injuries this year anyway.
Yeah, I feel like everything is like what Shaw was saying. I feel like everything's very interchangeable because there's so many variables to play. Like I forgot about COVID, you know, scenarios and stuff like that. There can be a lot of scenarios, you know, where Noah Vonleh, didn't he just have COVID? Didn't he test positive for the Bulls? Yeah, and then they cut him, and then he's just like, okay, there's gonna be trickle effect, and there's gonna be a domino effect throughout the season. It's inevitable. It's happening with other leagues, so that's gonna play an effect too. So honestly, the 1 through 3 spot for the East is very interchangeable between them. There's a lot of there can be a scenario where, you know, Giannis tests positive and he misses, let's say, 4 to 5 games, and if that happens, you know, in the final stretch of the season, then that's obviously going to affect, you know, their seeding. So, too many things to keep track of. So what do you guys thoughts on that? I love that point that Shaw brought.
No, I want to extend off that because with the contingencies and whatnot, you had Brooklyn at your number 1 seed. Brooklyn also has a few contingencies on them, and Jordan mentioned it there. Where do you have them, Jordan? Where do you have Brooklyn?
I have Brooklyn at 3, or just behind Miami. So very close.
Not too far behind, but it is really contingent on whether KD and Kyrie can make it through the season, and neither of those guys have shown us for a few years now that they really can make it through the season. I mean, Kyrie's been having injury issues and whatnot. How long now? KD obviously coming off two major issues. This could really go either way. Brooklyn could end up winning 60 games, and we could all be like, oh, yeah, we kind of saw it coming just because they have Kevin Durant on their roster. Is it a stretch? Maybe a little bit, but is it possible? I certainly think so.
Did you say 60 games? That makes them 60 and 12. 60 and 12? There's 72 games.
I have a lot of faith in Kevin Durant, and I had him at my number 2 when we did our 10 best players going into next season, despite all the injury stuff. I think Kevin Durant is the second best player of this generation behind LeBron. I truly think that, and I think that he can carry this team. I might sound crazy, whatever. I don't care.
Can I interject real quick though? Because the one thing that, and I've waffled, I'll be this. So if you listen to our show, The Baseline, and you're like, all right, where's this guy coming from? Because my biggest issue with Brooklyn coming into the year wasn't even so much their injury concern, was the fact that Kyrie and KD are moody ass dudes. And are they going to alienate the rest of their locker room with their kind of 7-11, whatever that crap was on IG, and the rest of the guys now don't feel like they're getting the ball. They're just watching them. I'm watching Kyrie trying to post up 4.5 times per half or whatever the hell he was talking about. Those are things that you have to be concerned about. Team chemistry really, truly matters. The one good thing I think about Brooklyn for sure, though, is that as of now, unless they make a move for Harden or whoever, is that they have depth to prepare for an injury to Kyrie and KD. So whether obviously Dinwiddie and LeVert are not Kyrie and KD, but those are more than serviceable guys that a lot of teams don't have. They don't have those level of guys, complementary players to fill in for their stars. So I think depth-wise, they're fine. But I was very concerned about their overall chemistry and their moodiness as dudes. And I'm not talking to the media and all that crap. That thing can definitely stop them from winning 60 games this year, as my man Raj was saying.
I love how the whole Kyrie made a statement about not speaking to the media. That's fine. To be honest, if you don't want to speak to the media, that's fine. And as David Aldridge pointed out very clearly. He's like, I don't care if he does. I'm not going to be angry, just as long as he and the team get fined. And then Kyrie got fined like, was it 25,000? Like the next day, you know what he did? Spoke to the media. That lasted about as long as I thought.
I knew that wasn't going to last long, and I think we talked about that on this show, right? About the dynamic between KD, Kyrie, and Steve Nash and Amari Stoudemire and the coaching staff. Shaw, we want to get your opinion real quick. How do you think that dynamic is going to work out? Steve Nash is a rookie head coach.
D'Antoni on his bench.
Yeah, and Mike D'Antoni. So there's a weird dynamic with the coaching staff going on there. And here's something. I don't think great point guards translate to great coaches. I saw what happened with Jason Kidd, and then there's other examples, but hopefully Steve Nash breaks that mold, but we have yet to see, really any true sample size of that. But just knowing how Kevin Durant is very demanding himself, I've seen a lot of instances where he disses Steve Kerr, on the court or whatever. He just does his own thing. And Kyrie is chaotic in himself too, a great player, but can be very controversial with the coach as well. So I just want to get your thoughts on that, on the whole Steve Nash, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving trio. How do you think that's going to work?
For Nash's sake, I'm glad he surrounded himself with a great staff. You got Udoka there. I mean, Amari, obviously we don't know about, but D'Antoni as well too. I think those are guys that those players should have to respect. But I would be very concerned. I don't know if you remember when the three-peat Heat got together or whatever it was they were calling themselves, the Big Three. And in that first season, LeBron bumped Spoelstra on the side. And Spoelstra, obviously, he didn't play in the league or anything like that, too. But it was a big thing down here in the South Florida area. I'm waiting to see if we have one of those kind of moments, if you will. But it'd be interesting because it's very similar. Like, think about, and I'm kind of jumping around, but just stay with me. I'll get there. With Doc Rivers, he was going back at Paul George in the media recently as well, too. And he's like, Ty Lue was right next to me the whole time, right? I think it's going to be a very, very similar situation. Steve Nash is going to be the head coach, but a lot of the play calls are going to be coming from D'Antoni's and Udoka's and things like that nature as well, too. So will Kyrie and KD assimilate and accept all that is definitely remains to be seen. But that's why I said they're moody dudes. So we don't know. And I think it's going to be fun to watch.
Amari's not getting a lot of play calls. Pick and roll. He's just trying to pick and roll, post up, wide bath after the game.
They have nobody who plays his style either. You know what I mean? So Mark's just like, okay.
Yeah, I'll throw myself under the bus a little bit. And I'll completely admit I was thinking 82 games and not 72 games. That's why I said 60.
Yeah, Rod was tripping a little bit. Games out of 72.
No, I mean, I think you all make valid point. And Brooklyn, the point I was trying to make with the 60-win thing was that they could really, they could swing on the real top upper echelon of Eastern Conference and really make a run even at the first seed. I think that's how talented they are. But, do the injury issues and do the off-court issues, the Twitter issues, whatever you want to call it, do those come into play? I certainly see that being a factor. I'm just a big enough fan of Kyrie and KD that I'm putting my bias a little bit towards those guys maybe putting the stuff together.
Do we have any? Yeah, Joe's in shock. I'm sure we all are at Raj's math ability. Do you guys have anybody winning 50 games? So 72 total. I had the Bucks being the only 50-win team in the East. I had them going 50 and 22. Do you guys have anybody as a 50-win team in the East?
Not in the East, no. Brooklyn's winning 60, of course, but other than that, no.
The Nets, yeah. I will go with the Nets, honestly.
Yeah,
as much as we're climbing right now, I will go with the Nets.
Yeah, and I would have to, like I said, I'm not a mathematician, so whatever. I don't know what you scale that is. You know what I mean? So would 50 be 60 in a regular 82 game season, or I have no idea, but yeah. I think Milwaukee and Brooklyn can come very close to those, definitely in the 48 to 50-ish range for sure, especially if everything goes right. They avoid anything from a COVID or major injury concerns. I think they will all be kind of in that mode. And to Raj's point, the last real quick thing on Brooklyn is why I changed my whole mindset about them being moody is because I saw them playing preseason. I was like, damn, those dudes are good. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like they'll win just in spite of themselves. Like they're just good. So it's hard to bet against them.
For reference, 50 wins in this year's 69.4% of the games. So that's
69%. I thought you were going to say 69 wins. I was like, what?
No. 50 wins is just about a 694 win percentage. Milwaukee 767 last year, Toronto 736, and the Lakers 732. Just for reference.
Yeah, and you imagine that, the shortened off season and like the compressed regular season as well does impact the way that a lot of these teams play. So it's definitely going to be hard. I don't think we're going to see teams with as high win percentages as we did last year. But I think there are many teams that are sort of in the hunt. And I don't want to say that Miami's going to win 50 games next season, but I think they could be right there, like 48, 49 wins. And I feel like Miami, even though they were in the finals, I feel like not a lot of people are really talking about them coming into the season because Milwaukee's got, Milwaukee had the trades and Brooklyn's a sort of flashy team in the Eastern Conference. Nobody's talking about Miami, and they're the Eastern Conference champions right now, but we all had them in our top 3, which I'm very, very happy to see. What you got, Henry?
No, I was about to say Jimmy Butler doesn't care. He's been talking about how everybody else is talking about every other team, and he got asked, he's like, does this scare you, or does this, like put you in a state of like worry? And he said he's not hearing anything else. All he's focused, he knows the Miami Heat are the best team in the East. And to him, that's maybe true. There's, KD and Kyrie coming back, but what Shaw said earlier, it's all about what you do in the playoffs. When you eliminate the Pacers, who had a red hot TJ Warren, the Bucks, and then the Celtics, all in stunning fashion, with a rookie Tyler Hero being one of the leaders leading the way. I'm like, okay, what are they going to do, in his second year, or Jimmy Butler's improvement, Bam Adebayo improvement. And also they added Avery Bradley, who was a key for the Lakers before, he opted out of the bubble. So they people are all already overlooking the Heat. I don't think we should do that. I don't know if you guys are, but that's why we got them in our top 3, very respectable. But I can see them going back to the finals and beating the Brooklyn Nets, because they're very, very team oriented, and that's something I feel the Nets still need to figure out because of getting 2 main ball dominant players like KD and Kyrie back. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Go for it, Jordan.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I mean, I'm a huge, we remember from all our shows in the bubble, I'm a big Jimmy Butler fan. Look at it, both the commercial just now. But no, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. No one is talking about them, but they don't care. That's something that Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra are going to go in there, before the season actually starts this week, and that's bulletin board material. Put it right up there. No one cares about you. No one's picking you. Anything that they need to fuel those guys, and they don't even really need that. Jimmy's the type of guy he's kind of got a little bit of that MJ Kobe vibe, where just like he'll just take any slight, and he just needs a little something to get him going. I
took that personally.
Yeah, literally, like that's how Jimmy has. He has some of that mindset for sure. And those guys, I mean, they're hungry, they're competitive. Bam's got to prove that he's worth the max money, and he's it's their culture, like we talked about all the way getting back to the bubble. They have such a very unique team-oriented culture. They push each other daily, on and off the court, and they are a very tight team. I mean, you see how close Jimmy Butler and Tyler Hero are after one season, and then that's really encompassing their whole roster. So I see them being, I don't know. We still, we'll revisit this obviously when we get to the end of the regular season and we see how everybody's been playing and who's healthy. But Miami's definitely going to be there, and they're going to be very hard to pick against.
Yeah, Shaw, you had them at 3, right? So where are you feeling like Miami? Even at that win number or whatever you want to toss into that conversation.
Well, again, like I said, I live in the South Florida area. Even though I'm not a Heat fan or supporter, it's just I'm inundated with their news on a regular basis. So I'm in this weird situation. I think right now, over the last couple of days, I've been struggling with it. I think Tyler Hero is one of those guys who's overrated and underrated at the exact same time. And, especially when it comes to trade, like, well, you won't throw him in a trade for James Harden. It's Tyler Hero. Calm down. like, calm down. But there's definitely growth that he's going to have. But, I mean, I don't know what he projects as. Like, what is Tyler Hero's ceiling at his best when he's 26, 27 years old? Like, I don't know what that is. Is he a 22, 23 point per game guy, 4 or 5 assists, 2, 3 rebounds? And I don't know what that is. I have him potentially right now, though, as if he doesn't start, he could be the Heat 6th man of the year. And I believe Bam Adebayo is gunning for the defensive player of the year. And this Miami Heat team is dangerous. And whatever they decide to do with their starting lineup, with Mo Harkless and Avery Bradley, and obviously everybody else what they have, we bring back Kendrick Nunn, the growth that he potentially should have. And Dragic, they kind of nursed him along all season, and then he exploded in the bubble. I think that's why a lot of people are concerned, is like, because this Heat team, they were basically 3 different versions of themselves last year, to be honest. And again, I live in the area, so it's like I saw them go off to the hard start last year. Then they kind of plateaued. Right. And then they got in the bubble, and they were like this college team on an AAU run that was just magnificent, playing guys who didn't even play. Myers Leonard sat. He didn't even play. Kendrick Nunn had proven he didn't play. So the way Spo was able to maneuver his lineup was very unique, and you just want to see if they can capture that magic again. But this is a Heat team that's extremely deep, extremely cohesive, as you all have said. Believe in defense. They shoot the hell out of the three ball. We even talk about Duncan Robinson yet, and I feel like they're going to be right there when all is said and done for sure.
Yeah, let's start transitioning into that next bunch of teams, and I think we were pretty consistent in terms of most of us had Boston, Philly, and Toronto in that group. And we have two. Shaw, you're a Boston guy, right? You're a Boston fan.
Correct.
Yeah, so we got two Celtics fans here. So let's start with the Celtics then. And I think Henry, you kind of nailed it on the head when you said, is Jayson Tatum going to be able to make that leap? I think he's going to make that leap, but I don't know if it's going to happen early enough in the season for them to be in the top 3 in the Eastern Conference. I think it'll come maybe towards if we have an All-Star break, whatever that's going to look like. I think it'll come towards a certain midpoint of the season, and I think he is really going to become a true star. I think right now he's a very, very good player, but I think he's going to become a star here in this season, but I think he's going to need a little bit of that adjustment period to get there. And the big man situation in Boston is always going to be interesting. Now they have Tristan Thompson there. Is he going to be the starting center? Maybe, possibly. I guess we'll have to wait and see how Brad Stevens decides to shake up the lineup. But I think that Boston, the Gordon Hayward situation is pretty interesting because in some sense, I feel like, it's still the loss of a quality player, even though he's an inconsistent quality player and he's not really on the court more than 30% of the season. That certainly does.
He got injured again.
Yeah, but he did have good games for Boston. He definitely did help them with some significant wins, especially in some of those games where he's coming off the bench. I thought he was really, really good. I still see the one guy that we keep picking on this podcast is Kemba Walker, and I still see that being Boston's biggest gap because even though Brad Stevens did wonders with Isaiah Thomas at the point guard position, I mean, we just haven't seen that sort of fruitful success out of that Boston team since then. So Henry, I'll let you start off. Where with you had Boston at 4 as well. Where are you kind of feeling about them going into the season?
I'm going to quote Jordan's article because I got it right here in front of me. I do agree with him that right when he says the other key is Tatum, who is just a tiny bit below a full-fledged superstar at only the age of 22. I completely agree with you. Jayson Tatum, I don't even see it happening this season where he takes that actual superstar leap. Because there's just too many variables this season that are going to stop him from doing that. I can be proven wrong, and I hope I am. But no consistent Kemba Walker to complement himself. Like I said, big men are lacking. The roster is still being figured out. Like I said, maybe Tatum, knock on wood, he tests positive for COVID some point throughout the season. There's just so many variables to consider, but. I think the best thing going for the Celtics is their depth that they're not aware of. Now let me explain that. The other day when they're playing against Philly, I'm a huge Peyton Pritchard fan. I have so much hype for that kid because he has done so much in Oregon, and he scored 16 points in his first preseason game. I know it's a preseason game, and I know that he's playing other bench players from Philly, but he was able to show how he pushes the floor, and I feel like Jayson Tatum needs that person with Kemba Walker out. Jeff Teague, obviously a veteran, but he's not really the type to push the floor. Peyton Pritchard is. I know that's a lot of pressure to put on a rookie, but this is the NBA. What do you expect? You have to take that leap from college to the NBA in order to keep up with everybody, and also just implementing Carson. I don't know if you guys saw Aaron Nesmith, but he played pretty good his first preseason game. Obviously, there's a small sample sizes, but huge potentials I'm seeing, especially from our 2020 draft picks. And I still do believe I have a lot of faith personally in Carson Edwards. Shaw, I don't know if you do as a Boston Celtics fan, but help me out here, man. I know his days in Purdue, and especially what he did in March Madness, is able to translate to let's say a backup or even a starting role with the Boston Celtics while Kemba Walker is out. Do you think he's going to be able to, take that leap in himself? Because he has all that potential. He's a scoring machine. He just needs to be given the right minutes and the right opportunities. What do you think on that?
All right. Bear with me, guys. I'm going to have some preseason overreactions and comparisons that make no sense at all. So if you follow me on Twitter, my first preseason overreaction was Peyton Pritchard is bizarro, low-level Fred VanVleet. I feel like he showed the signs, especially in the way that he played his game, obviously very much under the rim, kind of crafty in his play creation, and definitely shot the ball from deep with confidence and shot it well, kind of leaving a little bit flat-footed like FVV as well too. I like the young guy that I've seen, and I feel like he's going to have a bigger role. The Carson Edwards thing, I was hyped last year, Henry, I was hyper last year. I wanted him to really kind of like, come here and explode. And I thought it was. And maybe it takes guys like him a little bit of a time. I'm hoping Carson Edwards can be, and I don't know, if you guys will remember this, but like a Ben Gordon type. Ben Gordon was like lightning off the bench.
I had a Ben Gordon jersey back in the day.
Only the real ones.
If he can tap into even a smidgen of that, I think Boston would be great. And at the end of the day, it does come down to when and if Kemba comes back. So I think Peyton is going to have plenty of time to get some minutes behind Teague and Smart and things of that nature. Carson maybe get some minutes there too. But when Kemba comes back, I think Carson is the guy who's going to be pushed out of that rotation a little bit. My biggest concern, and last couple things I'll say, is the wing depth without Hayward. It's very concerning to me. I don't know if you can rely on Nesmith. Langford is another one who's always hurt. So what do they do behind, Tatum and Brown there? And for me, if Tatum is the guy, and I know people will say this is crazy, his counting stats in the bubble were phenomenal. You look, he's like, he had 20-something points and 10 rebounds, and he really dished the ball more than we thought he could, 5 assists a game. But it was still kind of, in some ways, pedestrian. He didn't control games like a star would. That dude, and I said this, on our show as well too, that dude we saw in late January and February was like player of the month type Tatum. If that guy shows up, then that's your perennial MVP candidate. So while his numbers were good and he was very good in the bubble, he wasn't that next level superstar that was like, oh my God, lighting the world on fire. He was getting 35, 40 points a game and on the West Coast trip killing dudes. If that guy shows up, Boston is in a lot better position. Sorry, that's my time.
No, I think that's really interesting because the thing about Tatum is we all know he can do it. And I think the greatest flash of sort of superstardom that we saw out of him was in his rookie season in those playoffs against LeBron and the Cavs, where he just kind of took over and really looked like, as a 19-year-old kid, he was just out there dominating players. And we're like, this guy is going to be special one day. And he's done it in short stints, but he hasn't been able to build up that consistency to really get Boston over the hump. And I think that's the biggest issue because I think they know that he's their star and they're just waiting for him to really blossom and become that player that they want to rely on. And, despite whatever Kyrie issues and whatnot happened in the past, it's still Tatum. Tatum is still the guy there. And he is really what everything is sort of circling around. Jordan, what do you have to add?
Yeah, I think actually Shaw's last point about Tatum is spot on, and it's something that people don't talk about when you talk about who's a star and a superstar and whatnot. It is that ability, especially it's hard for power forwards and centers because they generally rely on people to get them the ball. But anywhere from that 1 to 3 position, the ability to start to control the game, right? Control it on both ends, influence the other team's defense and to make them make the mistakes and take advantage, stuff like that. That's something that is that final stage, if you will. It's something that LeBron has obviously mastered. Guys like Magic, MJ, Kobe, those guys mastered it over the course of their career, the ability to just say, hey, I'm going to dictate exactly what's going to happen in this game, and I'm going to pick and choose to take advantage of the mistakes that you guys make on defense. And so that's the next step for Tatum. And he's 21, 22 years old. I'm not expecting him to master it this year. It's something that takes, 19. Yeah, something that takes a decade, really to master. But he is, obviously so talented, and hopefully he takes the step in the right direction and just continues to get a little bit better at it. As far as the point guard depth, it's well known what I think of Kemba. It's nothing personal. He's a nice guy. He really is. It's personal. Don't lie. It's personal. No, he's a great guy. And I just, he's just the injuries and the lack of height and defense just doesn't do it for me. So hopefully those guys, hopefully Edwards, I did like watching him at Purdue as well. And Pritchard seems like he's not the most, obviously athletically gifted, but he's a very high IQ player, which is something that's always valuable in the league. So it's going to be interesting to see who's going to step up for them, during that time, because even though I rag on Kemba, he can still get you 18 a game and is capable of breaking down the defense. So they do have to find somebody to replace that, since they don't have Hayward coming off the bench to give them that, 13 to 15 points when Tatum and or Brown are sitting. So it'll be interesting to see how Brad Stevens shapes those lineups in the first couple of weeks.
Yeah, when you talk about missing that guy, that's kind of why I had Toronto drop so much this season, and we all underestimated them going into last season. Obviously, Nick Nurse, Coach of the Year, Nick Nurse, very well deserved Coach of the Year when they're brought them to that second seed after losing Kawhi, and I think nobody saw that coming. I see them taking a pretty significant step down, though. They obviously gave the big paycheck to Fred VanVleet. I like Fred VanVleet. I don't know if he's worth that much money, if I'm being completely honest with you. We also saw that Pascal Siakam is not quite the player people were expecting him to be after the playoffs. He's a good player. I don't know if he's an all-star. I really don't know if he's talented enough to call him an all-star right now.
Well, I got to interrupt real quick. Would you rather pay Fred VanVleet or Joe Harris?
Neither. Can I pick neither? I like Fred VanVleet much more than
VanVleet showed up in the finals. You got to give him like some credit for that.
No, listen, Fred VanVleet's a good player. Kyle Lowry's a good player. Pascal Siakam's a good player, but none of them are that guy, and that's why I just don't see Toronto having the sort of edge over a lot of these other teams, which I think have one, if not more, than that guy. So like, I like Toronto. I think they're going to be a good team. I just think that, because of sort of what we opened this conversation with, the East being a little bit deeper this season than they have been in previous years, I see Toronto slipping enough to where they really could fall to the 6, and they could be anywhere as high as a 3. I think Nick Nurse is that good of a coach. He's got a lot of the same returning pieces and whatnot. I think they could certainly pull that up, but they did lose Marc Gasol as well, so that does hurt them. I just don't see Toronto having enough to really be a home court team in the Eastern Conference, and I see them sort of being in the lower group. But I'll open the floor to whoever wants to take it. Where do you guys see Toronto ending up here?
Well, sorry. No, Henry, please. I
was gonna say I can see Toronto staying stagnant. If you know how we're talking about who is that guy in Toronto, it was supposed to be Pascal Siakam once Kawhi left, but it was not Pascal. If anything, like he made his first All-Star appearance, yes, but in the playoffs he became very, very stagnant, and that's where he hurt the Raptors. When he was supposed to step it up and take that kind of that. What Shaw was talking about, the player that can control the game. I thought for Toronto that was going to be able to be Pascal Siakam, but if he keeps playing very predictable basketball, and when I say predictable basketball, I think we all know his back to the basket game is very, like I said, predictable. And if that's all he has to offer on the offensive end, and the defenses are going to figure him out so well and so fast that it's going to hurt Toronto more than help them. So Pascal Siakam needs to figure it out in terms of making that leap. I know he made his first All-Star appearance, might make his second one, but he has no consistent jumper. He doesn't really get fouled around the baskets, but there's just a lot of inconsistencies to his game. And I like Pascal. I like Fred VanVleet. Honestly, I love Kyle Lowry, and I know a lot of people don't like him, but I think he is the true leader of that team. So that's why, Toronto was able to stick together very, very well last season. But I think it all falls on Pascal Siakam's lap because he's the most skillful player on that team. I don't know what you guys think.
Well, I think Lowry's a little bit maybe over the hill. I think he's going to start hitting the real sort of downturn of his career where he hits that age thing and really starts to feel it. But I'll let you guys respond.
Yeah, I mean, I think the two big losses of Ibaka and Gasol are going to hurt. Both those guys are obviously on the other side of 30 and on the downhill of their careers. But Ibaka, I think, did a really good job for them in the bubble. He's going to, he'll provide the good length, rebounding, and defensive ability for the Clippers, which is something that's going to be missed by Toronto. And then in terms of Gasol, I mean, you already see with the Lakers in these preseason games, his ability to catch the ball in the high post and operate as a big man point guard and get the ball where it needs to go accurately. I mean, I'm already thrilled with how well he's been playing. So I know Toronto's going to miss that as well, especially for times when Lowry and or VanVleet may not be on the court. I think they're going to win a lot of games because of the IQ of their team. I think they're still a very smart team and very well coached with Nick Nurse. I think he should be in the running right away for Coach of the Year if they do well, because he's going to win those some games on his own. But yeah, the big key is going to be Siakam. I think he got figured out. Boston really just had him all sorts of, they took care of him basically. He was just going to that same, drop spin move in the lane. And they were able to neutralize him in the bubble. So hopefully he went back into the gym this summer or this fall and put in some work and worked on expanding his game, because that's going to be, what determines if they could be a 4 or 5 seed or if they could be even worse. If he plateaus again, it doesn't get any better. I mean, we could be talking about them as a 7 or 8 seed. Because he has all the athletic gifts, which is something we say a lot in the NBA. But you also have to put it all together, right? You have to be able to create your own shot, play off the dribble, knock down open threes, stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of step he makes this year, if any. Yeah,
Shaw, any additional thoughts on Toronto?
Sure. I mean, Siakam just has to show fire. I mean, they're saying all the right things as you'd expect right now in the preseason. Well, he heard your slander and he's going to come back and be tough this year. All right, fine. Let's see it. I think what Toronto needs more than anything else is the continued development of OG Anunoby. And hopefully that guy can turn into something for them. He's not obviously a knockdown shooter, but he can hit, with his feet set, and he can slash and he can dunk and he's physical. So if he can step up a little bit, that maybe takes some pressure off of Siakam. They really like Terrence Davis down there as well, too, and somebody who I think is going to get some plus minutes. Even Matt Thomas coming off and playing a Duncan Robinson type role for them, shooting the 3-ball. So all these young guys, like, they're really going to rely on them in their depth. And as you were alluding to, even with Lowry kind of getting up in age, they're going to be phasing him out. And it's the same thing that they had last season that we're going into this season. And, hey, if this thing doesn't go right, well, they have some parts that they could potentially sell off, and maybe they could probably get a first round pick for Lowry for a contender, especially like Milwaukee doesn't have any more to give. But I'd love to see Lowry alongside, Drew Holiday in Milwaukee. Like, that would really put them over the top for me, in some aspects too. And watch Chris Boucher. I mean, he's to me, he's a bizarro Christian Wood. I mean, Christian Wood's barely Christian Wood, but Boucher, I think, is a guy that also projects as a mobile big who can shoot in 3. Doesn't have the same quite passing skills as well too, but somebody who's going to get some minutes behind Aaron Baines for them as well.
I like this bizarre. I like the use of like, this guy's a bizarro.
Christian Wood of all people.
Yeah, you picked that, and then who would you say? Pritchard was a bizarro. Fred
VanVleet. Yep.
I would say Horton Tucker is probably bizarro LeBron. Right there. I'm going to start using it. I like that. You should trademark that.
Does the one team that we didn't mention from that group was Philly? Does anybody have? We kind of talked about them at the top. So does anybody have anything else to add on Philadelphia?
Their 2 best players still can't shoot threes. Mm-hmm. That's gonna hurt them.
Actually, we've talked about it a little bit, but Shaw, I want to ask your thoughts. Do you think Doc Rivers is enough to really put this team on the upswing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to cop out. I just don't know. Doc usually has good initial results.
Mm-hmm.
And then he kind of wears on people. He kind of has a shelf life for whatever reason. But those first few years, he's usually able to get teams to another level in some aspects. So I think that will potentially and probably happen here. Remember, he already has some chemistry even with Tobias Harris, from when Tobias was a Clipper as well too. And I think they'll be using Harris a little bit differently as they maneuver. The Maxey kid looked really great in preseason, the first game that I saw as well too. I didn't really think he could handle the basketball and initiate offense the way he did. Then in the fourth, he was kind of like, all right, my show, I'm going to start scoring as well too. Shake Milton they really like him down there or up there for me, I guess. They really like him too. And while I'm maybe not as sold on a Shake Milton type, they really feel like they can get role players to do exactly that, play the roles and help Embiid and Simmons get to that next level. So I feel like Philadelphia is poised. As everyone has said, the middle of the pack in the East is a crapshoot. It can go anywhere. Philly could be 3, they could be 2, they could be 6, they could be 7. We just don't know, especially when you factor in obviously the intangibles of COVID, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I like Philly's ability to potentially bounce back and especially get better throughout the course of the season after they build a little bit of chemistry with the new guys they brought in.
And they're a team too with health issues, much like the Nets. I mean, Embiid has not been a symbol of health his entire career. Simmons had the issues in the bubble that forced him out for the playoffs. So they kind of have their own injury concerns. I do like the point about Maxey. I was going to bring him up. He's somebody that I was kind of, when we lead up to our draft show, I was doing some research on him and they had a lot of ESPN features on him. And he's just been, he went to Kentucky, which I think is the best school for getting guys ready for the pros. So he had a good education there on the court. And then basically up until the draft with everything with COVID and missing March Madness, he's just been out in LA, just like working out 3 times a day, playing, in the weight room, playing basketball, and it's all rinse, wash, repeat all off season there. So I think he's someone that, while he's not going to come in and score 15 a game for them, he's going to be able to, if Simmons misses a game, he could step in and provide a little bit of a sparkle. He's definitely somebody that fans will be watching if you're someone who wants the Sixers.
Real quick, Jordan, I want to get your take on it. The addition of Dwight Howard, losing him in LA and then him going to Philly. Like, what do you feel about that and how that's that opened up a can of worms? All right, my bad.
No. That is a great question, Shaw. I appreciate that. I'll tell you exactly what I told Rajan Henry like a couple weeks ago when we were doing the free agency show. I would fly to LA. I said I'd fly to LA to then drive to Dwight Howard's house and pick him up and drive him to the airport.
My God.
I said I wouldn't drive him across the country because I'd get so sick of him for after 3 days. No. I mean, he's obviously still physically extremely gifted, and if Embiid does go down, he'll be able to play some solid minutes. But I think that the reason that he did so well with the Lakers last year was that LeBron and AD and that front office set him straight right away, right? And they were like, "Hey, not a single screw up or you're gone. And Philly, I just don't think they have that. And I think you look at their culture already, right? Embiid's a jokester. He loves to have so much fun. I think, those two together, while they might be funny on Twitter sometimes, it has the potential to have some issues. I mean, he's already getting sued for not paying people to take care of his snake collection or something. It was the most Dwight Howard story ever. So in summary, glad he's gone. Good luck to all the Philadelphia fans out there. When Dwight Howard comes in, commits 3 fouls in 7 minutes, and misses like an alley-oop dunk, you'll understand. And I'll be here.
Thank you for bringing up that Dwight Howard discussion. We really appreciate it. As we approach the hour mark here, let's start to close things out. And I kind of want to just open the floor to the rest of the teams that we mentioned. Is there any other team that you really do want to talk about? Because there are certainly some interesting sort of case studies there with like Washington and with Atlanta that we mentioned being a part of this bottom tier, even if Indiana slips in is in the play-in or whatever. Does anybody have any thoughts on any of these teams? Shaw, I'll toss it to you first. What are your thoughts on this group here?
I was listening to another show the other day, and it was interesting because they really focused on kind of the bottom of the East. You know what I mean? And I wish we did have more time to kind of talk about it because, it's interesting. I think 15 teams, right? And you feel like 11, 12 of them probably have some stake or some skin in the game. And then if it's a playing field of 10, if you don't, then are you even worth your salt as a franchise, right? But I feel like, no offense, Raj, I don't think Cleveland has much of a chance to be knocking on the door. And I don't think the Knicks have any chance of knocking in the door in the playoff tournament. And I don't believe Detroit does at this time as well, too. But you can make an argument for Chicago. You can obviously make an argument for Charlotte and Washington. I think 7 through whatever it is, 11, 12, like it's tough. Like I think all those teams are really going to be fighting, and it really might come down to a matter of a COVID, case coming down to where a team gets booted out or loses their opportunity to get into that field. So to me, it's all very relative. Each of those teams have questions. I can understand the conversation with Atlanta specifically. You want to play Gallinari $20 million a bit to come off the bench? Is he worth that? What happens with John Collins? Is Capella going to stay healthy to give them enough defense to stay on the floor? Again, even with Washington and Westbrook and Beal, does Beal finish out the season there, or does somebody like Boston use their trade player exemption to try to steal him away? Like there's so many things that can happen at the bottom of the Eastern Conference, and I think it's going to be fun and very, very intriguing, especially with the play-in tournament involved. Yeah, those are all great points. Henry, what are your closing thoughts on the East and that sort of bottom group there?
I just want to. Well, are we talking about bottom? Like
no, like the play-in, the 7-8 and play-in.
Okay.
No, we're not talking about the Cavs right now.
I was like, you want me to talk about the Knicks? I'll do it. No, but I want to talk about the Hawks for a bit because I feel like like I said, they had the second best offseason behind the Lakers. There's just going to be a lot of jumps. Hopefully, their head coach Lloyd Pierce, he has a lot of potential in himself. Trae Young is a very, very, very special talent. I'm not talking about at least not now a generational talent, but his confidence has skyrocketed so early on in his career. That he's ready to lead that team, especially with the right pieces, the right veteran pieces. Danilo Gallinari can score. Bogdanovic can score. Clint Capella, he's a presence down low. I think they have finally the right pieces for the Atlanta Hawks to finally be a contender in the playoffs. And we haven't really seen that since the Al Horford, Jeff Teague, that whole era right there. And even as good as I got, they only to get, murdered by Rogers Cavs. So now there is no LeBron in the East, to take out the Hawks for any of their chances. So I have a lot of high hope for them, especially because, like I said, they hit the lottery. I mean, they hit, a gem in Trae Young. He showed a lot of potential in his Oklahoma days, and it transitioned well into the league very, very smoothly, and he's just showing out. You know why I say he has a lot of confidence? Because a lot of his passes are between defenders' legs. And you got to have a lot of confidence to do that, 8 out of the 10 times. So for Trae Young, a lot of potential and a lot of confidence in himself. I can see the Hawks making a lot of noise. So that's just me, though. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, Jordan, what are your closing thoughts here?
I'll say one thing on Trae Young, and it is a good thing he plays in this era and not like the 80s or 90s, because those league passes would not fly. He would have gotten Bill Laimbeer would have sent him with a hip check into the third row. Tried that back in the day. No, it's going to be interesting. I think Shaw makes a good point, like how especially this year with the expanded playing game, it gives teams a little bit extra. The teams that may have thought they might have been out of it are not quite on the fringe now have a chance. As far as I think the Wizards, I think they're going to be any team with Russell Westbrook is interesting because he is such an interesting and unique player. I think he, like Raj said at the very beginning, he is good enough to win games on his own. So you put him with Bradley Beal, who while he's a terrible defensive player, he's very dynamic on offense and grown his game over the last couple of years with John Wall out. So the duo of them is going to be enough to keep them in games. And it's like, I feel like as we get closer, maybe the first week or two into the season, if they play well, like I could talk myself into them as like the 9 or maybe the 8, because they have, I think they overpaid for Bertans, but he's an absolute sniper, and that's going to help because, Westbrook's shooting issues are well documented. You have Thomas Bryant at the center. You have Rui Hachimura, who's a good young rookie, Jerome Robinson, Troy Brown Jr. Like they have some pieces that if they could all get them, if Scott Brooks can get them all together and on a good game plan and playing hard every night, they may not win as many games as as other teams, but they're not going to get blown out either. This isn't going to be the typical Wizards season where they're kind of, they've been the laughingstock the last couple of years, but I think they could definitely make things interesting, and not that they'd beat anybody in the playoffs, I don't think, but they would make the first round at least somewhat difficult for whoever they're playing, just because, while Westbrook is such a, what's the word? He's a me-oriented player, obviously. But, him and Beal together, it's a lot of firepower. So I'm interested to see what Washington does. And you'd like to see him succeed, at least for our guy Joe Cardoso's sake.
Could we see a Russell Westbrook, Kevin Durant first-round series there in the Eastern Conference playoffs? I think that would be a lot of fun. I think that would be a lot of fun.
The amount of cupcake memes that would be sent online.
They hugged each other in that preseason game. They're best buddies now.
They're fine. Westbrook gets pissy for like 5 minutes.
Throw that beef away. But that'll bring us to a close for this episode. Thank you, everybody, for watching. You know where to find us. But thank you to our special guest there, Warren Shaw, for joining us. Let people know where they can find you online, your podcast, all that good stuff.
Appreciate it, Raj, for sure. Follow me on Twitter at Shaw Sports NBA. Follow my great co-host Kali at Game Face Lee, and our show at NBA Baseline. Weekly shows, always content, just like these fellas here, man. We had our Eastern Conference preview up. We'll be dropping the West this coming week, so make sure you tune in. Appreciate it, fam.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for joining us. This was our Eastern Conference preview. I won't be here tomorrow, but Jordan and Henry with another special guest will be holding down the fort tomorrow for the Western Conference preview. I will give my thoughts, Jordan, so you're not going to get away with
I'm
gonna give Henry my thoughts so he can read them tomorrow.
I got show. In case you guys don't know, tomorrow's show is called an NBA Western Preview: How the Lakers Are Going to Dominate by Jordan, and that's just good. That's all I'm going to do.
I thought you were just going to name it Lakers in 5.
I love it.
But yeah, you know where to find all us. You know where to find Nuts and Bolts Sports. Also, be sure to check out our merch store on Bonfire. Search NBS merch, and tune in for these guys' Western Conference preview.